Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Admiral, for being here. As you're aware, the Chinese president, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, is going to be in the White House this week and receives the full honors of a state visit. But our relationship with China is not at a good place at this moment. They've breached U.S. government databases. They continue cyber attacks against other elements of our government. Over the last 20 years, we've witnessed the single largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world, as Chinese companies backed by the Chinese government have stolen proprietary data and U.S. state secrets. And now, of course, the personal data of at least 25 million Americans, if not more. But one of the things I've advocated is a three-step process. I think we should be expelling known Chinese spies that are operating in the U.S. as retaliation for these cyber attacks. I think we should be disconnecting all sensitive databases from the Internet to ensure that our agencies that are responsible for protecting government databases are doing their job. And I think we need to make clear that we're going to respond in kind to deter adversaries like China who will continue to attack us. I guess my question begins by asking you, would you agree that a public discussion on an offensive cyber capability would be an effective deterrent?
I think we as a nation need to have a very public discussion about how do we achieve this idea of deterrence, because if we don't change the current dynamic in it, we are not in a good place. And we have got to fundamentally change the dynamic we're dealing with now.
As the director of NSA and as commander of the U.S. Cyber Command, have you provided advice to the president? I'm not asking you what the advice is, but have you provided advice to the president or the White House on ways to defend against cyber attacks, cyber deterrent strategy, and appropriate measures for us to respond to such attacks?
Yes.
And I understand that you're not charged with creating policy, but has the White House sought your opinions on policies relating to these matters, specifically on a more effective cyber deterrent and best practices for securing U.S. government systems?
Yes, I'm very happy in the process in the sense that, hey, I'm just one perspective. I certainly understand that, but I've certainly had the opportunity to communicate my views as to what I think we need to do.
I guess my last question is going back to the points that I've raised about expelling Chinese spies operating in the U.S. as retaliation and also disconnecting the sensitive databases from the Internet. Are these measures that you think are worthy of exploration? Would they have any sort of deterrent effect or be part of the broader public discussion about this issue?
Certainly in my experience, one of the things we found was one of the challenges, particularly for Cyber Command, my other hat where I deal with penetrations in the Department of Defense. One of the things that we have come to understand is you need to minimize your exposure with what we call public interfacing websites, connectivity with the Internet. The flip side, though, is that there is a requirement in many instances to ensure information flow for the Internet into systems. And so the idea that you're going to be able to do some of these things with no Internet connectivity, again, it depends on the situation, can be problematic if you expect data to flow back and forth.
I just have one last question. I apologize. It's kind of a matter of doctrine, more or less. Our doctrine, the doctrine of most nations, if not all on earth, is that there is a difference between intelligence gathering on governments and intelligence gathering on private entities. Clearly, multiple nations, if not all around the world, have some sort of intelligence gathering capability, and it's targeted primarily at the governments and government actors in other nations, especially those they have an adversarial position with. Is it fair to say that for the Chinese there is no such distinction, that for them the notion of intelligence gathering, they view commercial intelligence gathering and governmental commercial gathering as all part of their foreign policy and intelligence gathering capability? They don't have that distinction that we have,
right,
or other nations have. Is that an accurate assessment?
They clearly don't have the same lines in the sand, if you will, with that regard. I mean, I watch some of my counterparts there do things that under our system I could never do.
I get exactly. So the point I'm trying to drive at, because many Americans are not perhaps fully aware of this, is that the Chinese government actively encourages, as part of their national policy, the stealing of commercial secrets of American companies for purposes of building up their own capability. And this is directed by government. This is not like a Chinese company hacking an American company. This is directed, influenced, and funded by the Chinese government itself.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your service.